Springs. I bet we got some of those things in the Peace River too, and we need to figure out how to say them with such enthusiasm. I've got some enthusiastic things to say about our Charlotte Harbor and the Peace River, and that is that we're going to try to swim it on the 4th of July. I was in Tampa, actually, on Davis Island at the office of the Coast Guard to further negotiate about the marine event permit that is now required for the Freedom Swim. And when I say that a marine event permit is required, most people can hardly believe it. What are you talking about? What are they doing? What's the Coast Guard doing concerning our local activities? This isn't a military matter. This is a local community matter. Well, when you look at the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 33, Navigation and Navigable Waters, there's a Part 100 entitled Safety of Life on Navigable Waters. And the purpose and intent at 100.01 is that the purpose of the regulations in this part is to provide effective control over regattas and marine parades conducted on the navigable waters of the United States so as to ensure safety of life in the regatta or marine parade area. Geographic coordinates expressed in terms of latitude or longitude or both are not intended for plotting on maps or charts unless the geographic coordinates are expressed. This is some administrative things. They've got some definitions. So the purpose and intent is to regulate, provide effective control over regattas and marine patrols. Parades. Regatta or marine parade means an organized water event of limited duration which is conducted according to a prearranged schedule. An organized water event of limited duration which is conducted according to a prearranged schedule. So they consider the Freedom Swim a marine parade or regatta because it's organized, it's an organized water event of limited duration which is conducted according to a prearranged schedule. The district commander is the commander of the Coast Guard district in which the regatta or marine parade is intended to be held. State authority means any official or agency of a state having power under the law of such state to regulate regattas. Navigable waters of the United States means those waters described in other sections, specifically waters described in another section, but it applies to the Peace River at this location in Charlotte Harbor. Trust me on that. Coast Guard and state agreements, they could have them in order to say who's going to do what and who's going to regulate and what's delegated. But then the submission, here's 4 years ago they contacted me, the Marine assets there in Fort Myers Beach. That's the Coast Guard Fort Myers Beach office. And they said, we want you to submit a marine permit for the Freedom Swim based upon our authority under CFR.
Did they do that for the dragon boats that they did in Charlotte Harbor?
I don't know. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a number of events that may and may not. You know, we had the Freedom Swim for 16 years.
Well, you said organized too, and if everybody's been on the Freedom Swim, it's not exactly organized.
Well, but there's a time, and it's called, and I do a press release and all of that, and right. So I formed a not-for-profit corporation, Freedom Swim Inc., in order to make the marine permit. And so the submission of an application, this is what's required. An individual or organization planning to hold a regatta or marine parade, which by its nature, circumstances, or location will introduce extra or unusual hazards to the safety of life on the navigable waters of the United States, shall submit an application to the Coast Guard District Commander having cognizance of the area where it's intended to hold such regatta or marine parade. Examples of conditions which are deemed to introduce extra or unusual hazards to the safety of life include, but are not limited to, an inherently hazardous competition, the customary presence of commercial or pleasure craft in the area, any obstruction of navigable channel which may reasonably expected to result and the expected accumulation of spectator craft. So that's what caused the Coast Guard to contact me and say you need, or some organization needs to submit for marine permit, marine event permit. And so it goes through all of the things that you have to do and submit. And so I did. And that application really was a few pages long. It wasn't all that onerous to fill out. It was the person completing the application. I gave my name, gave an email address, application for approval of marine event. The name of the event was the 20th Annual Freedom Swim. The date's 4th of July, 2012. And the location is the Peace River in Charlotte Harbor from the north end of the southbound US 41 bridge to Fisherman's Village on the south shore in Punta Gorda. Same as past years. The time this year from 2 p.m. in the afternoon till about 5 p.m. The name and the address of the sponsoring organization, Freedom Swim Inc. The number of participants unknown but based upon past events, approximately 250 swimmers and another 100 boats, including kayaks and support vessels, arranged by individual swimmers. Size of the boats, the answer was various. Type of the boats, various. Number of spectators or spectator craft, unknown. Description of event, an uninhibited swim for the fun of it, short enough to be doable and long enough to be a challenge. Will this event interfere with or impede the natural flow of traffic? Yes. What extra or unusual hazards to participants or non-participants will be introduced into the regatta area? Swimmers crossing the main channel of Charlotte Harbor and stretched out for an hour or more. Have any objections been received from other interested parties? No. Vessels provided by sponsoring organizations for safety purposes. Volunteer vessels on each side of the swim course, 8 but unknown at this time, and those provided by the participants themselves. That was the answer. Does the sponsoring organization deem their patrol adequate for safety purposes? Yes, was the answer. Is a Coast Guard or Coast Guard Auxiliary Patrol requested for control of spectators or commercial traffic? The answer, no, but you have in the past and may continue to impose an idle speed in the segment of the river being traversed while swimmers are in the area. Person in charge, I gave my name. Will there be, where will the person in charge be during the event? I answered swimming. How can the person in charge be contacted during the event? Come find me near the back of the swimming string of participants. I'll wave. That was the answer. Person to be contacted for further information. I gave my name and phone number, etc. That was the extent of it. And I gave a graphic that showed sort of the detail of how that would go in accordance with the tides, which I went to the tide predictor and to pick the 2 o'clock date, 2 o'clock p.m. start time, and so I went to the www Tide and Current Predictor. That's actually tbone.biol.sc.edu/tide/tideshow.cgi. Okay. When I put in the dates, I end up getting the tide predictor for Punta Gorda that shows a high slack tide at 3:32 on July 4th. So in the morning, where we have started the swim in previous years, we had the same tide that caused everybody a problem last year, and actually has caused the Marine Patrol to want to impose significant additional constraints upon the Freedom Swim. So last year's tide, and all of the people who got out in law enforcement and Coast Guard boats, over 100 last year, folks, caused this almost to shut down the Freedom Swim this year. So we didn't take care of ourselves. This Freedom Swim is really intended to be an expression of self-reliance, of taking care of oneself and one's buddy. And when people climb on law enforcement and Coast Guard vessels, every person that climbs on is a gig against the event. Every person that climbs on is a gig against the event. Let me say it again. Every person who climbs on one of those law enforcement vessels is a gig against the event, and they use it to impose additional constraints and restrictions. That doesn't mean that if you're in trouble, you're not supposed to get out on a law enforcement or Coast Guard boat. For goodness sake, get out if you need to. If you need help, accept it from whomever comes. But don't, if there's a private vessel and a law enforcement vessel there, get out on the private one. They don't hold that against you. They'll take you where you want to go, back into the string, whatever. The point of it is that last year's tide, people didn't swim it. They got blown way down past Colony Point, and it was a problem. And hundreds of people, at least 100, were picked up by law enforcement boats. So this year's tide, 3:30 is the high slack tide. If we start at 2, there will be an incoming tide still for the first hour and a half. First hour, everybody will be swimming against an incoming tide. Those people who put their face down in the water and just swim will do fine. It's the people who are in flotation devices and bobble along that are at the whim of the weight of the tide, the current, and the winds that get themselves in trouble. This year, if you try to parallel the bridge, which you should have done last year, if you try to parallel the bridge this year, you will be swept into the bridge under the pilings, and people will be clinging on to barnacle and oyster encrusted pilings. Don't do that. If you're not a strong swimmer and you don't have a support group with you that includes a boat of your own or a kayak of your own, if you're not a strong swimmer, don't come swim the Freedom Swim. It's 1.5 miles. It can be dangerous. People can get cramps. There may not be anybody there to help you right away. You have to be able to take care of yourself and swim with a buddy and have close support in order to do this safely. It's not just a lark. Mothers and fathers, don't send your young children to this event without you being there or without somebody that you trust and rely upon to be responsible for that child. Children should not be showing up at this Freedom Swim on their own, period. If you can't swim, if you're not a strong swimmer, don't come. Watch. Get in a boat. Enjoy the time on out on the water and around it, but don't become a casualty. This is really important. Nobody wants anybody to be hurt on this. And so we've got an incoming tide that will go for about an hour to 1.5 hours. So most people are going to be swimming. If you're a swimmer, you're just swimming against the end of an incoming tide. Those of us who do it more slowly, who tread water, who try to go, I'm going to head pretty much directly toward Fisherman's Village, and that will blow me back a little bit toward the bridges, and then as the tide changes to slack, and then to outgoing tide, it will allow me to be pushed directly to Fisherman's Village. It's going to be an easy swim if done correctly. That's the problem. Last year, it was not as easy a swim, and the outgoing tide took people more than 100 off course so that they had to get into law enforcement vessels. And that's what's caused them to, now I had to go because when I got the draft marine event permit. This is from the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Coast Guard, and they had conditions that would have been ruinous. I mean, there's no organization to do the kinds of things that they demanded. But I ended up, in order to have a Freedom Swim this year, agreed to some things, and here's what I need help with. I need help because I'm required to furnish 12 official boats with a minimum length of 16 feet and at least a 2-man crew for each boat to control the event. The boats must be marked with a highly visible device so as to be easily identifiable for safety, as a safety vessel. And I'm required to have a captain's safety vessel meeting a week ahead of time that will be attended by the Coast Guard. And so I need help. My phone number, my cell My cell phone number is 941-661-5622. That's 661-5622. I need to have 12 volunteer captains with their vessels that are willing to be on the water in the afternoon to post on the sides of the course going from the Charlotte Harbor to Fisherman's Village, so as to be helpful and identify and help people to keep them on course and to be there in order to be safety for the swim. That's in addition to all the other boaters and boating that should be going on with your families and friends in order to assure their safety to cross. But I need, if you can be of assistance, if you're willing to volunteer, you have to have an adult, 2 adults on the vessel, 1 at least to drive and 1 to watch, and they can't be drinking. No alcoholic beverages during the event. So, and be willing to come to a meeting ahead of time, a week ahead of time. So call me, 661-5622, if you can participate in that. The other matters that I have to do is that I have to stand up and make sure to ask everybody if they can swim. I have to identify the qualifications that make sure people are qualified. And so if you can't swim, I'm starting it right now. If you can't swim, don't come and expect to get in the water and cross the river. Get in a boat and cross the river. Don't get in the swim if you're not a swimmer, and I recommend that you be a strong swimmer. Okay, I've got to have 1 person designated not participating in the swim to serve as an emergency point of contact. Somebody on one of those 12 vessels, I need to volunteer to be a point of contact, to have a radio that will be working on their vessel as well as a backup cell phone. There's going to be a sign-in sheet. Coast Guard is requiring me to have a sign-in sheet for people. I can't make anybody sign in. It's not my sheet. It's the events sheet for the Coast Guard, and it will be at the beach, and I will announce at the beach that the Coast Guard is requesting that people give a name and contact information. That list will then be given to the Coast Guard. What they do with it, I don't know, because not everybody shows up at the end. Not everybody goes to Fisherman's Village. Not everybody gets in at the same place or at the same time at the beach. People jump in from their boats and get out on boats. So I told them that it was garbage in, garbage out. What they wanted me to do was to account for, get a name and address and contact information for each person that got in, and then count them as they got out and account for everybody. And I explained, I said, that's just not going to happen. That's not how this works. That's never how it worked. And you're asking for something that I can't provide. And so the compromise was I would have a sign-up sheet at the beach. So that's what's going to be there. They want me to take a head count of participants. I told them I couldn't do that. And then so I've got to provide appropriate instructions. Additionally, I have to make sure that the participants know about, and this is primarily the boaters, the potential presence of bottlenose dolphin, manatees, and sea turtles, and civil and criminal penalties that could result from their harassment, injury, or death. The event sponsor also, I'll be giving out an educational package to each of the boaters that are the official boaters, and I'll be posting that along with the tide chart at the beach so that it can be viewed by people who are getting into the water. Next year, I mean, really and truly, this was a wrestling match like you can't even believe, and I couldn't believe it. It got very hot for a while. I told them that the Coast Guard was killing the Freedom Swim, and so in order that it not die, I need people to step up. I need 12 captains to help me with bringing boats over. And I think we've got just a minute or two as we get out of here. 3 minutes. 2.5. 2.5 minutes. So if you're ready for some freedom, come the 4th of July. Charlotte Harbor to Punta Gorda, we're swimming on the tide. Will you wear a bathing suit? What will you bear? Wash yourself in the rivers, freedom's waiting there. Well, you don't know if you make it, oh no, don't know if you dare. Come on, swim the bay with me, we think we're going somewhere. With cheetah floats and swim fins, cold drink of beer, lots of Peace River between here and there. Watch out for the speedboats, sharks beware, loads of crazy people floating around out there. So if you're ready for some freedom, come the 4th of July, Charlotte Harbor to Punta Gorda, we're swimming on the tide. And drums, and drums. No, the Indian drums.
Oh, the Indian drums.
And we're out of here. We'll see you on the radio next week. Hey, anybody has any influence with the game freshwater fish people, Florida Wildlife Commission, tell them not to put that helicopter up in the air over the Freedom Swim. It's a waste of money. We'll see you next week.